Hey there, everybody. This is Kelly, Lactation at Baby Beloved, and we're going to talk today about supply concerns. One of the most common reasons that moms and dads reach out to me is because they're worried about their milk supply. Is their baby getting enough? Am I going to have enough to pump at work? All kinds of just lingering questions about that. Or they've been working on their milk supply, it's not going up, and they're like, okay, what's the next step? Where do we go from here? So let's talk a little bit about this. Milk supplies, both the unders and the overs, or the overs and the unders. So first thing that we have to talk about, though, is the real versus perceived low milk supply. Many women, even though they're making plenty of milk, they are convinced that they're not. So there are many reasons why they might be convinced that they're not making enough milk. One is because their baby takes a bottle after nursing. This is everything I'm going to tell you today. There's it depends that comes along with each one of these sentences. So yes, okay, that might be one reason that might point you into the assumption that you don't have a lot of milk. But I will tell you that most babies will take a bottle after nursing. Not everybody, but after they're done nursing, they have a nice burp. They might have a diaper change. They might go in for a little bit more. So if you were to offer it, they might take it. After I have a really big meal, I'm not hungry anymore. But if you offer me a cookie or a piece of cake, I probably am going to eat it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I need it or that I didn't get enough at my meal. Same for your breast. It doesn't automatically mean that the baby's not getting enough milk from the breast. It's one of those things that in a bigger scheme that we can look at. But just know that most babies will take a little something from a bottle because they're not stupid, just like us. If it's offered, we probably will take a little bit more. The second one is because moms say, I can't pump enough. I can't pump out as much as baby takes by bottle. Okay, that might be true, but is it a low milk supply or is it a poor pump or a poor pump fit with the breast shield size? Or are we pumping long enough? Or are we double pumping? Lots of things that go into pumping that can maximize how much you get out. So a pump is not the same as a cute, sweet baby in your arms. So when you are smelling and touching and just gazing at your baby, your prolactin, especially your oxytocin level, which is the hormone that makes your milk let down, it is going to be flooding through your bloodstream, helping you have a letdown, just letting down milk to that baby. Versus you put on this plastic pump stuff and there's this this motor going on that you don't love, like your baby. It's not as cute as your baby. It doesn't smell good. So those things can all inhibit the release of oxytocin that makes your milk let down. So oxytocin is the love and bonding hormone. So naturally you're going to love your baby and bond to your baby. Maybe not so much with your mechanical pump. So it's lots goes into pumping and how much comes out at a certain time. So that in and of itself is not exactly going to tell you where your milk supply is at. I don't feel full anymore. True that you may feel full 2, 3, 4 days after delivery, or your breast may get larger and firmer, heavier, all that sort of thing. And then weeks and months later, your breasts have regulated. And so you may not feel that hardness happening unless you go super long between feedings. But later on, your breasts are going to feel very different than they did in the first days and weeks of lactation. So that in and of itself does not necessarily mean that you don't have any milk. I don't leak. Hey, you get to save a lot of money on nursing pads. Not everybody leaks. I leaked for my first one, but not my second one. So who knows? I had plenty of milk. But it's not necessarily just because your friend leaks, or even if you leaked for a previous baby, it doesn't mean necessarily anything at all in terms of your milk supply. I don't feel my letdown. Well, again, some women feel their letdown and some never do. Some feel it in the morning or when they're really full, but not at other times. Some feel it in the early days and weeks of lactation, but as the months go on, they don't feel it anymore. All of that can be very normal, and it has nothing to do with how much milk you're producing. So all of these things in and of themselves, taken apart, even put together, they don't really tell you much about your milk supply. It could be, say for instance, you take the one about the pumping. If your baby's gaining weight well, which is in the early months, in the first 3 months, we look for about 2/3 to 1 ounce a day. If they're extracting the milk from your breast really well and gaining weight well and having lots of poopy diapers and is thriving, your doctor's like happy with the growth and you're buying bigger diapers for baby, all of those things are happening, but you don't pump out as much, or you don't leak, or you don't feel full anymore, or feel you're let down, then you can just cross those things off, because your baby gaining weight on exclusively the breast tells me a lot more than any of these things listed there. So let's go into the anatomy, some things that you may not have heard about in your 6th grade sex ed class. This is a breast, obviously. You see all the yellow is fat tissue. Usually when we're not lactating, all of the pink parts, which is the milk-making cells or factory, if you will, they shrink. And then most of our breast is made up of fat. But then when we get pregnant, the fat kind of recedes and then this grows in. Although the pink stuff that you're seeing there, the milk producing glands, and then you see the long lines, which are the milk ducts, and then you got your areola at the end and the nipple at the end. So this is kind of a representation. So what we know about how milk supply is made and maintained is, number one, from the 16th week of pregnancy on, you've already started making colostrum. This little factory starts kicking in and just waiting for that baby to be born. So you don't even have to think about it, because the first meal already made inside while you're pregnant. So sufficient glandular tissue. So all of that pink stuff, the milk ducts, the milk producing cells and glands, those have to be there, obviously, to be able to make the milk at a cellular level inside of those things. There's milk being made and stored in those grape-like circular things that you see. So obviously we have to have some glandular tissue. The second thing that we need is an intact nerve pathway between for the ducts. So intact nerve pathways and the ducts. So if you've had any kind of surgeries or biopsies, anything that could sever those ducts, or say even perhaps if you had a breast reduction and the areola, which you can see there on the top, the brown part was removed. If you have any incisions around there and it was removed and then sewn back on by the surgeon, there could be some nerve damage, like maybe you don't have as much sensation or whatever. But we need a lot of nerve endings on our nipple and areola to be able to send a message to our pituitary gland, which is deep in our brain, to send hormones of lactation. So there are stretch receptors on your nipple. So whenever baby is latching in your areola, so whenever baby is latching and or if you're pumping and the nipple, that skin around your nipple and areola is being pulled, there are little receptors there that send a message to your brain to say, hey, somebody wants some milk, you better start kicking it in here and giving me some hormones so I can start working on making milk in these milk producing glands. So we need the glandular tissue to start with. So we need the factory, but we also need the order placed, which is the nerve pathways. So that somebody's sending a message to your pituitary that they want some milk, and then that message comes right back down to your breast to create the milk inside those cells. The next thing we need is adequate hormones and hormone receptors. So those hormones that we're talking about, oxytocin, prolactin, insulin, all kinds of things that we need that are needed to create the milk inside those pink cells, will come from, well, I guess from your brain, the pituitary. So you're going to get different, you're going to order those things, and then they're going to come and they're going to act on your tissue. So we also need the receptors. So there are receptors laid down inside that tissue, just waiting for that hormone to come on by so we can connect and create milk. And the next thing we need is frequent and effective milk removal. So the first three, like you'll make milk, even if you're planning on formula feeding, your milk will still come in. So around day 3, 4, 5, even if you didn't latch in the first few days, you're still going to go through something called lactogenesis 2, which means your milk, the colostrum that you had inside is going to become more, there's going to be more volume, more water added to it. So your breasts are going to get bigger and you're going to create milk. But what happens after that is whether you continue to make milk and produce milk is based on frequent and effective milk removal. So if you are formula feeding, you do not want to breastfeed at all, you would just keep that. You'd probably wear a good supportive bra, use some cold packs. You would keep that milk in there. You would not remove any milk from your breast. Because if you started pumping or letting the baby latch or hand expressing or taking that milk out at all, you're telling your body, yep, keep it going. We want this production. Keep this up. This is what we want to do. So if you do want to breastfeed and you do want to make some milk, then that is exactly what you do. Is frequent, which is typically about every 2 to 3 hours. Somebody or something, either the baby or the pump or your hand, is removing some milk. And when you do that on a regular basis, day after day, you're going to create more and more and more milk if all of these things are in place. So we need the glandular tissue with intact nerve pathways and ducts that are not severed. We need hormones and the hormone receptors, and we need frequent and effective milk removal by either the baby, the pump, your hand, anything. Just it needs to get out of the breast, because if it stays in there, it's going to tell your body you don't need it, and it's going to eventually go away. So those things are from a larger framework, those are the things that create a good milk production. So let's start with frequent milk removal. I say 2 to 3 hours that a baby would nurse. It can be every 1 hour, it can be every 4, but just on average about every 2 to 3 hours, and that's from the start of one feeding to the start of the next. So if your baby is not latching for whatever reason, that's when, it's going on for a long time and many feedings and days, that a baby is not latching at all and removing the milk. So a baby is maybe needing to be fed another way. It behooves you to remove your milk until the baby can latch on and do their job. Because if you don't, like I said before, if you don't remove the milk, it's going to tell your body that you don't want it. It's going to send a signal that says, stop all production. Don't open this factory. We don't want the milk. So, and the opposite of that would be lots of pumping or hand expressing to keep that milk going. So whatever it takes to get the milk out, that's what you would do. Ideally, the baby, they're the best pump you've got if they're willing to latch on and do their job. And if they can do their job, they're the best. They're the best thing that can get your milk out. Just like we talked about all the hormones that are going to get activated by them. So are there some things that can interfere with breastfeeding? Yes. Most of the time, moms and parents do great. They can just latch their baby, they lift their shirt, latch their baby, life is good. I mean, a little bumps in the road usually, but then they usually figure it out within a week or two. But for those moms and babies who are not figuring it out, or like if it's not going well, I would encourage you to reach out, because we need to figure out why, like what is getting in the way of your milk production. Again, the first one can be nipple anatomy, breast anatomy. So if you have, sometimes if you have a really flat nipple or a nipple that inverts in and it makes it difficult for the baby to latch on, that would be something that you'd want to get some help with. There are some tips and tricks and techniques about that we can help you through. Breast surgery and piercings, like we said before, if any of those milk ducts have been severed or any of the nerves have been severed and disrupted, that can affect things. Piercings too. I've had it go a couple ways where moms have gotten piercings through their nipples, and sometimes the milk just comes out great. They come out all of the holes, and the baby's really happy. And then other times, depending on if you've had some scar tissue, it can make it more difficult for the milk to get out. So it bears watching really closely and getting some lactation help if you've had any kind of surgery or piercings to your breast or nipples. Some things, hormonal issues related to progesterone, estrogen, thyroid, any of those things can interfere with your milk supply. They can make too big of one, and they can make too little of one. So if you have any history of any kind of hormonal disruptions, I would highly recommend that you talk to your doctor and get some lactation help right away, just to make sure. Another one is metabolic issues such as insulin resistance and diabetes. Insulin is very important for milk production, and that proliferation of all of your milk glands and ducts and all of that too. So it's kind of complicated, but I do know that if you've had diabetes or if you've had insulin resistance at all, if you're worried about that at all and you're struggling with milk supply, there are some things that we can help with that, but it does just reach out to someone as much as you can. And if you're still pregnant, even if you're not, I guess, even if you've had a baby, getting good control of your blood sugars, and even working with a dietitian if you need to get a good a diabetic diet, plan in place is going to be helpful for you in terms of your metabolism. So getting the metabolism up and running, because it takes a lot of energy to create milk for another human being. So you being in a good metabolic place is going to help your while you're pregnant, but also while you're lactating, and your entire life, of course, too. But those are some things that can really impair milk supply. Postpartum mood disorders, they really don't know if it's chicken or the egg. If, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders cause breastfeeding issues, or vice versa. If you're having issues, does that throw you into some depression and anxiety? But we do know that they're correlated. They go together a lot. Some suggestion of some neurotransmitters that may just be off. So that's a difficult one, but again, highly recommend you working with your doctor or your midwife, your therapist, your psychiatrist or psychologist, but also lactation to maximize as much as we can and keep you on a good, healthy path for your emotional health as well. Engorgement and mastitis. When our breasts get too distended like this, it sends a message back to our brain that we don't need this milk, and so then things start to shut down. So engorgement is something that you would want to mitigate as quickly as possible and reach out to lactation for. Engorgement's when your breast gets super, super hard and nothing is moving, like your milk seems to be stuck in there. Mastitis is an infection of the breast, and sometimes when you get an infection of the breast, your supply in that breast can sometimes go down. It usually goes back up with some work and some extra latching and pumping or whatever, but it sometimes can temporarily see a setback in supply on that side. Your other one, this is why you have two, the other one usually picks up where the other one left off. The mastitis side left off, so usually it corrects itself and evens itself out just fine. Mother's illness. Sometimes if we are really sick, we're vomiting, we have diarrhea, we get dehydrated really quickly. If you're severely dehydrated and sick and you can't eat and you can't barely even lift your head up and definitely don't want to pump or breastfeed your baby, those are things that can impact your milk supply as well. And there are some medications. Most medications are completely fine for breastfeeding, but it's good to run them by your doctor and your pharmacist and lactation consultant just to make sure that they're not ones that can inadvertently decrease your milk supply. Fecal lutein cysts are cysts that you can get while you're pregnant, but then afterward they don't go away. So they can send off hormones that interfere with milk production. So that is something definitely that you would want to get checked out by your doctor if you have a history of that or your doctor suspects that at all. Just to get a simple blood test to see where your hormones are at would be beneficial. Sometimes a difficult birth and a postpartum hemorrhage. If you've been in labor for 3 days, you're exhausted. Maybe you're not eating and drinking and you're just like kind of gobsmacked and your body's had it and you're exhausted. Postpartum hemorrhage, breast milk is made from blood. So when we lose too much blood, and too fast especially, that can impact our milk supply at times. So those are things that sometimes you might see a delay in your milk coming in. It usually does come in, but sometimes it can be delayed. So that's something to check out with your doctor if that has happened to you. C-section, that's major abdominal surgery there. I mean, I know it's routine, but it is major for your body. Your body does not go through that every day. So sometimes there's a little delay in your milk coming in, or production if you haven't been able to nurse well, especially while you're recovering from your C-section. Say you can't sit up well, or you're nauseous, or you just, any number of things. But that is another thing that can impact supply sometimes. Usually we'll get things right back on the road, but especially in the early days, it can interfere. Torticollis is something like if a baby is having trouble latching on and being comfortable at the breast, and they're not removing the milk very well, that can impact your milk supply. That would be a question for the doctor, your pediatrician. Tongue and lip restrictions. If your babies can't latch very well because just of their mouth anatomy, that would be something that you would definitely want to get on top of and talk to your pediatrician or a lactation consultant about, because if they can't do the job of removing the milk, then your milk supply is going to go down unless you start pumping. But it's a tricky situation where if the baby's not taking the milk out or they're causing a lot of pain to the nipples. So that is another thing that makes you dread feeding and maybe delay the feeding a little bit. So that's no fun at all. Again, reach out if you suspect that at all. Unsupportive partner and family, they have a huge role in the partnership of how breastfeeding goes. So if you have someone in your life who is constantly saying, I don't think he got enough, and are you sure he got enough, and baby doesn't look very happy there, those kind of questions or those kind of comments can really erode your confidence and make you question everything about yourself. So if that person in your family or your partner is very concerned, if there's some credence to that, say the baby's not having very many diapers as much as they should, or the baby is fussy all the time, or not gaining weight very well, then what they can do is they can help reach out for help and schedule an appointment to get some lactation help. That would be more supportive in the long run. So if not to poo-poo their comments, but also having an honest conversation with them about whether what they're saying is founded in real data or if it's just being unsupportive, and to see what might other things that might be behind their comments. Stressors, lack of sleep. Cortisol is something that is, it's stressful having a baby, of course, but there can be some other stressors in your life, as there in everyone's, of course, but some other stressors. Maybe your mom's going through cancer. Maybe your husband just lost his job. There are so many other stressors that can come into this, our daily lives, that can sometimes affect our milk supply too. So another thing is lack of sleep. Prolactin, which is that hormone that produces milk, it really does well when we get some sleep. It rises when we get some sleep. So going on days and days and days and weeks of running on fumes and not getting any sleep at all can be detrimental to your milk supply and your mental health and your overall health as well. Extreme diets, calorie restrictions, dehydration. You don't have to eat a perfect diet, and we put on weight during our pregnancy to get us through those first few days and weeks, when we're just kind of on an adrenaline high and we're just kind of so focused on baby. But at some point, if you're losing too much weight and you're eating only one meal a day and maybe you're peeing only 3 times a day, it's dark, and concentrated, and you probably that's the first thing to try is increasing your water and asking someone to prepare you some meals that you can eat, calorie-dense meals that you can eat with one hand. That would be more supportive to you. If you can have someone plant water all over the house in water bottles. So wherever you sit down, anywhere that you go, you're going to have some access to water. Those things are a fairly easy way to increase your milk supply if you think it's low. And then the pump sizing is wrong. So like I said before with the pump, if you're trying to pump and not very much is coming out and it's hurting and your nipple seems like it's rubbing too much or too much of your areola is getting sucked in there, you may have the wrong breast shield size. The breast shield is the thing that fits right onto, it's like a little horn, it fits right onto your breast directly. So that would be something that a lactation consultant can check on with you. To make sure that you've got the right size for that. So all of these things, there's so many things. I didn't even list them all. There's even more, but you get the idea. So many things can interfere with breastfeeding and our milk supply. So what are some things that may help people some of the time? So there's no magic bullet about nothing helps all people all the time, but just here are a few ideas that may help sometimes. Reglan versus domperidone. So these are medications. So if you have met with lactation and you talk with your doctor and you're sure it's none of the other things that are listed on there, and you've tried all of the other things that we can think of, and you get to this point that you want to talk to your doctor about medication, there are some medications that help increase your prolactin level, and that's the hormone that produces milk. I would recommend getting a baseline prolactin blood draw first before you start any medication, because any medication that you have, there is a risk of side effects. Anything, even Tylenol, has a risk of a side effect. So you want to make sure that you are really aware of the side effects and making an informed decision about you starting any medication. And so it's going to be tricky because our prolactin level is going to be different at different times of our lactation journey. So you can there may be ways that you can find it online, or you can consult with a lactation consultant to get that list of, or your doctor. Sometimes the labs will have it, but I'm not finding a lot of labs have that, those values, but they're out there. Because when you first latch, like after you latch, and if you get a blood draw right after breastfeeding or pumping, your prolactin level, that hormone that produces milk, is going to spike high, and it's supposed to spike high. It's supposed to be at the highest peak. So you would expect it to, in response to those stretch receptors and suckling and stimulation to your nipple and areola, you should expect that to go really high. But then later, a couple hours later, it drops. And so that is normal. If you get a blood draw before pumping, it should be at its lowest. But then in response to suckling, that's when it should rise. So if at all possible, I would talk to your doctor about getting both readings, one before and then maybe one 30 minutes after latching, or as soon as you can. If you can take the baby even to the lab with you, that would be great, or your pump. So if those lab levels are normal, these medications are not going to help you typically, because they are based on the premise that you have a low prolactin level. So again, talk with your provider, talk with lactation before starting any kind of medication, and see if there's something else that you can work on, and hopefully get a baseline medication or baseline lab work before you take any medication. More Milk Plus versus Legendary Milk. So there are some herbs on the market. There are some more reputable companies than others. More Milk Plus has been around for a long time. It's organic. I trust them that whatever's in there, I'm not getting paid for them at all, but whatever's in there is whatever they say is in there is going to be in there. It's a good reputable company. But there are lots online that you can check out. But as you know, herbs, sometimes they're not regulated, and so sometimes they may have the amounts that they say that they have, and sometimes they don't. So again, any kind of herb is also not a magic bullet, and sometimes works for some moms and sometimes doesn't work. And there are side effects to these things too. If you have allergies to anything, or if you have some thyroid disorders or autoimmune disorders or any clotting disorder, lots of things like that, you'd always want to talk to your doctor before you start any even over-the-counter stuff, because it might help your milk supply, but you may have some supply or some other side effects that you don't want. And again, not a magic bullet for anything. I know Instagram will tell you differently. If you go on Legendary Milk's website, you're going to see a lot of success stories, but just know that it doesn't work for everybody, and there are a lot of different things. I would really work with lactation before you even choose one of those personally, because they all work on different aspects of your lactation situation. So anyway, Legendary Milk is only different because it doesn't have fenugreek. So fenugreek is an herb that it's found in India. They put it, lots of people in the world put it on their food after to help aid digestion. So they eat it as a seed and they mix it in with their food, and it helps aid digestion. Sometimes it aids it a little too much and you get a diarrhea, stomach ache, gassiness, stuff like that. So again, side effects do exist. And some people are not a candidate for fenugreek. So if that is you, then yeah, probably Legendary Milk would be the next best thing. But again, there's so many things mixed in with all of these herbs that it's a good idea to see what the actual main problem is and then kind of go from there. Metformin and goat's rue is something that doctors use sometimes for moms who have insulin resistance. And also, goat's rue is kind of a precursor to metformin. So metformin is a prescription that you would get from your doctor. And so sometimes some of these things help, again, with the insulin, which would help with the milk supply. So, or if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, sometimes that helps. These medications help regulate other hormones that you have. So that is one thing that you can talk about. Grain-based foods and beverages. So there's not a ton of research on foods that increase your milk supply. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff out there, a lot of cultural norms that people use foods to increase their milk supply. Just not a lot of high-quality evidence that any of it works. But a little bit of evidence on oatmeal, a little bit on barley, and the beverages are really just to keep you hydrated. So if you're peeing 6 times a day and if it's clear and you have a good stream going on and you're not dehydrated, you don't have to drown yourself with beverages or fluids or anything. You're probably hydrated enough. But if you're, like I said, if you're only peeing 2-3 times a day and it's really dark, then that might be a signal to your body, from your body, to increase your fluids. Again, with the grains, the oats, that's something that sometimes helps some women. I think it's also because the fiber helps with insulin resistance. So I think part of it is that the barley, the oats, the chickpea, the dandelion. So these things aren't going to hurt you, but they may not be a magic ticket, but they might help. They might help. They won't hurt. Like none of these things really have a lot of side effects too. Chickpeas sometimes can make you gassy, but otherwise, and the high fiber, I guess, can affect you. So ease into it and see how your body responds. We already talked about water's role. So hyperlactation sounds like a good thing, but it also, like getting a freezer full may sound like, oh, that would be so nice, but it comes at a cost, meaning that some moms who have a lot of milk, either because of some hormonal issues that they have, maybe they have some hyperthyroidism, maybe they have some other issues, some pituitary things going on, or they have been pumping or using a Haakaa or like doing lots of extra milk removal in the early days and weeks of lactation, and they have really ramped up their supply. So say baby takes 2 ounces at 14 days. I'm just throwing that out there. And then you go and moms are still full, so they pump another 2 or 4 ounces off. Now you're telling your body, if you do that on a regular basis, you're telling your body that you've got twins or even triplets. So obviously your one baby is not going to be able to eat 4 ounces if they're used to eating 2. So now you get this extra 4 ounces. What are you going to do with it? You can put it in the fridge for a little bit, but then it's going to expire. So then you move it to your freezer. And so you get this freezer stash, and you're like, oh, it's nice to have that in there. But now, if you do that 8 times a day, 4 ounces 8 times a day, that's 32 ounces a day. That's another baby for sure. Now you've got twins. You're producing milk for twins. Meaning, you decide you want to go camping with just you and your partner and your baby. You're not going without your pump because your body is so used to making that extra 32 ounces. If you just cold turkey not pump it out and just stop doing that, you're going to be in pain. And you run the risk of mastitis and plug ducts and lots of pain. Anyway, so it sounds like a great thing, but it is a commitment because you have to take your pump everywhere you go, or your Haakaa, or something to remove this milk for you just to be comfortable. So informed decision making on your part, like if you want to, like, I am going to go hog wild, I'm going to fill this freezer, and then I'm going to wean my baby. Okay, if that's your plan, that's one thing. But if you don't want to be hooked to your pump all the time and you just want to nurse your baby, pump while you're at work maybe, and get a little freezer stash going, that's a very different game than going into hyperlactation mode of pumping after every nursing session just to fill your freezer. So pros and cons, depending on your goal and what you'd like to do, but just know that, especially in the first 2 weeks when milk supply is being established, try not to pump too much. Once a day is not a big deal, but if you find yourself doing it 6 to 8 times a day and you're getting good volumes out, then I would slowly wean off of that to keep yourself comfortable, but you got to keep that milk in there and not take it out to tell your body what to do in the next phase. So there's that. There are some medications, herbs, and vitamins that may reduce your milk supply. So if you do have that issue and you're like, I want to kind of reduce my milk supply here, birth control, especially with estrogen before 6 weeks, can sometimes reduce your milk supply. Sudafed, Wellbutrin, sometimes. High doses of vitamin B6. And here's some random herbs just that sometimes can reduce your milk supply. So if you're trying to reduce your milk supply, you can look into those. Again, make sure that you consult with your doctor to make sure you're not allergic to anything or responding to anything. Or like say you're taking some sort of medication that might interfere with one of these herbs, you're going to want to cross-check that with your doctor or the pharmacist as well. Is my pump the problem? I had this pump here on the right, this Spectra one, the other day with a mom, and it looks really nice. It's a really nice one, except the expression mode, it was only going at like 24 or 26 cycles a minute, which is very slow. It just held the nipple, then let go, and then held the nipple and then let go. It was just really slow and not like a baby would be. So you want a pump that has 2 phases. So the first phase, when you first start pumping, it's going to go maybe 70 sucks per minute. So it's going to be suck, trying to spur on a letdown. So it's like stretching your nipple, sending that message to your pituitary, asking for milk, asking for that letdown. The average woman takes about 2 minutes to have a letdown. So whenever your milk starts pouring out or drizzling out or spraying out or whatever, you notice something's going on there. then you're going to hit the button to make the suction go slower. Now, it might be 45 cycles per minute, but 20, something in the 20s might be a little too slow. So just double check with your pump to make sure it cycles at least minimum 45 cycles per minute and probably maximum about 20 cycles per minute when you're stimulating. And then there's the suction. So the suction is how hard it pulls. So the cycle is how fast or slow it goes, and then the suction is how hard it pulls. So you want to make sure that you're getting some good pulls but not killing your nipple. So you want to go as high as you can without hurting yourself. And again, that's where it comes into making sure that you've got the right breast shield size as well, where we can help with that. Lactation can help with that too. Sometimes pumps come with multiple different sizes that you can try it out yourself and just see which one feels better for you and gets the most milk out. So that's another option that some pump manufacturers make. So the next thing is this an anatomy issue? So there's, going back to our first slide when we talked about, do we have some glandular tissue? So we needed the nerves to be intact, of course, but we also need some glandular tissue. And although it's rare, it does happen. I see it more because, of course, the women who are having trouble are going to be coming to me. So I see a population that is having trouble. So naturally, I'm going to see more issues in anatomy. And when I say anatomy, there's something called hypoplasia or insufficient glandular tissue. So basically, all those pink cells that you were seeing, some women have more glandular tissue or milk-making cells than others. Some make more on one side and some on the left. Like most women make more milk on the right side, and fewer women make more on the left. And that can be very normal. But sometimes some women, like say when they were going through puberty, or lots of reasons for this, but definitely if they had any kind of hormonal disruptions when their breasts were forming, sometimes that can affect how much glandular tissue you have and how much capacity that you have for producing milk. There's no one definitive way to know if that's you or not. But working with lactation, trying all the things, maximizing how baby is doing and the pump is doing and all of the hormonal issues and like running through all of that stuff, working with a lactation consultant to check, we're just checking off boxes about all the possible things it could be. And if we run out of things and you have some markers, then we can sometimes draw that conclusion. So one of the markers that we see in moms who have insufficient glandular tissue or some hypoplasia is some marked asymmetry of the breast. So like one is quite a bit larger or differently shaped than the other. Again, most women have one breast that's larger than the other, but if it's a lot larger than the other, or a lot smaller, or very different in shape, sometimes that can be a marker. If you have more than 2 inches of space between your breasts on the inside edges of your breast, sometimes it's 1.5, but about 2 inches. If your breasts are more widely spaced, that can sometimes be a marker for impaired milk supply. High mammary folds. So like if your breasts are higher and the fold on the underside of your breast is pretty high up on your chest. And sometimes that can be an indicator. A tubular shape to your breasts. So like if they're more, like especially if one is more tubular and the other one isn't, kind of just like longer and rounder, but longer tubular shape, that can sometimes be an indicator. Another thing I see as a red flag for me sometimes, especially with women who have breasts like this, is that they had a lot of infertility or their breasts didn't change at all while they were pregnant. They didn't grow any larger. It's not always the case, but usually some sort of enlargement or some sort of change in the breast is expected while you're pregnant. So that might be one piece of the puzzle that we look at. bulbous or plump areolas or nipple areas. So like, especially if one is more bulbous looking than the other, then that can sometimes be something that we look at. A droopy appearance of small breasts. So like they're smaller breasts, but they're kind of droopy, not from weight, that they would be extra heavy and droopy from weight, but just a small breast, they have a droopy appearance sometimes, would be an indicator that we would look at. And again, before you make any decision about whether that's you or not, I would talk to your doctor, your midwife, and lactation, and rule out all the other possible causes. Because you know what? Sometimes your milk supply is just fine, even if you have all of these things that I'm mentioning. Breasts are amazing. They're amazing, and they can do crazy things that keep me on my toes. So it behooves you to work with lactation and your doctor and get on a multidisciplinary team to really figure out what might be going on, and if anything's going on at all. Like I said, a lot of women just think they have a low supply, but they really don't. So that would be something that we can easily check out during a consultation together. So that would be the next step. So if you still have questions and you need to talk to somebody, talk through all of these things with somebody, please reach out. There's my QR code, and it's babybelovedinc.com. We're in the West Michigan area and the Southwest Michigan area, but we can also do Zoom calls and telephone calls too, so to help you talk through all this. So hang in there, and if you have any questions, please let us know, and thanks for listening today.